Okay.
Okay.
Okay, shoot.
Okay. Hello, thanks for stopping by on this video. I'm here with my friend Joanna Tennent, and we sat down about 6 months ago and had a talk about osteoarthritis and how it was experienced by you at the time. And we were chatting the other day and realised that you're now 6 months post hip operation, hip replacement, and as always we have more questions than ever. So I thought we would record the second conversation as a follow-up to our first chat and just check in with where you're at now, 6 months post surgery, and what you've learned and gathered along the way. So thank you for sitting down with me and for doing all the prep that you've done. We have a little idea of what we're going to run through, but really it's just about chatting and sharing your experience so that other people can learn from it. So, hello. And maybe the first thing I'll say is that I listened back to our chat in the past, and what really came through was how much your hip pain was affecting your life. So 6 months on, post the surgery, how are you?
In terms of pain, definitely not as it's not as loud, and it doesn't affect the things I do like it did back then. I actually look back at a video of something I did back then as an effort to try and have less pain, and I was in a lot of pain. It was quite interesting. It was like 2 months before the surgery, but it was limiting the weight bearing on that side. So pretty much by the time I had the surgery in August last year, so 6 and a bit months ago, I couldn't really walk up our hill at all without, it just stopped me. I said to someone, I couldn't walk, that was my problem, and they said to me, why not? I said, because it hurt. So it was the pain that really, up until that time, I kept saying it was just limiting what I did, but it was actually the pain. I wasn't really on pain medication pre-op, but my spectrum of what I could do was limited. I could bike though, so that in a way was a real blessing, because I could still get some kind of sort of cardio. So now, walking is not a problem. Hill walking, flat walking.
So, do you still feel pain?
Well, I just had a go at lifting your dumbbell, which is quite heavy. And I have to say it was. I don't feel pain, but there's a sense that I'm careful with that kind of thing. That was about 130 kilo. But yeah, so no, not really. Sometimes there's a bit of discomfort locally where everything happened, but not like that was. Not like that was. Like I really had limited range of motion, especially into flexion and into rotation, and a little bit abduction, and yeah. So no, it's sort of like just low grade now. It's not bothersome, and it doesn't limit. Yeah.
And would it also be fair to say that the experience of having hip OA took up a lot of your attention, and is it still on your mind as much now?
Yeah, I'm still really engaged with sort of like making my functioning happier on that side, on the hip side, on the surgery side. But as I was saying to you before, I look back at my diary at what I was doing back then, and I had 4 kind of rehab approaches going on at the same time. So I really did give myself I was focused on what can I do to help myself, more than I am now, definitely,
Right.
Yeah, so, it was a successful operation, can't deny it. Some part of me still thinks, well, I remember the difference, like now, thinking about having it, and it was kind of a weird experience to go through, but it was a successful one. But before, in that whole year before, when it was like maybe on the horizon, and it was like, oh no, like it was just the worst thing the worst thing. Why was it the worst thing? Sort of thinking that there was something wrong with me, I think, and now I've got this titanium and ceramic and polyethylene something. I have no idea. I don't feel like it's in there. Someone says, do you feel it? You don't feel it. And so there is a before an intervention like that, and an after, and it's sort of like you just wrap it up and you do it, and I don't feel any less me because I don't have a osseous hip structure. What was your question?
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. And what you've alluded to is where I kind of want to go next. And our first chat, I think, covers a lot of these kind of logistics and just like you did a really good job of just like laying the state of play for hip OA and surgery. But you're not the only one that goes through this. So hip arthritis or arthritis in general, and then treatment being a surgical intervention is very common, and what I understand it's only going to get more common. So one thing that I really want to kind of tease out from you is, once you were looking at the subject and diving into it, you've already alluded a little bit with these 4 things in your diary that you did, but what would be your advice, or what worked for you pre your surgery? What did you do to help the function of your hip?
I'm just going to segue a little bit.
Great.
But at New Year, where I was at New Year, there were 16 of us, and 7 had hip issues, and 2 of them had already got the idea of a hip operation, a hip replacement, a total hip arthroscopy on their radar. One of them has been doing a lot of has got a genetic component to what's happening, and had done a lot of gym work, and had been trying to really build up his muscle strength and things. The other one, who is an architect, wasn't too bothered about that, and really, given the fact that he saw me being quite happy post-op, felt like he wanted to just jump into that position. He has
Just wanted the operation.
Yeah, he might have had his idea of the body as being a bit like a building that he builds, and if something's not working, you just remove it. Don't bother about the prehab. And that was really annoying. I said that the current thinking is that you don't go straight for that sort of terminal end stage option. Rather, you try and build up the capacity around the hip to see if that makes a difference. Are you kind of like using your body in a way that is kind of like annoying the hip, and could you give yourself some more options, give your body some more kind of like range of movement that might offload that kind of like pain sensitizing thing. So my approach to the prehab was to build up. I sort of started that a year before anyway, starting flirting with kettlebells and dumbbells and things as a mature woman. And so I was in the middle of a dumbbell, was it dumbbell? Yeah, dumbbell training then. And so I kept going with that. It was an online one. But it was doing things like it was like getting hinging with deadlifting, was doing squatting to build up the capacity around the hip and lower limb, lower body, and then some more upper body things as well. And that just makes sense to me. Because what happened after the operation was that everything went offline, and so if I got that to the best capacity that I could before, that to my mind meant that my body would sort of remember it in some sense, and I could get back into that and help to, bring it back up to the baseline and build from there. But apart from the loading side of things, like loading up the lower body as much as I could, I noticed that I couldn't do that program as well. The closer I got to the surgery, it became just it was annoyed by things, so I had to kind of bring it in. But the biking, I have to say, having something that I could still do that was aerobic and didn't annoy, I feel like that was so helpful. And so I live near a peninsula, and you get outside, and it's just, you have to deal with Wellington winds, but so I think that if you can find something that is not annoying and aggravating, provocative, whatever that is, I feel like that just chirps up the system somehow. Yeah, gives you a leg up.
And what it's also doing is giving you some control and autonomy in a situation where you might not have a lot.
Yeah.
So you get to do some effort, do some work, and you're hoping to claim a little bit more ownership over what's about to happen.
Yeah.
Would that be fair?
Yeah, it would. So on the day of my surgery, I had to be at the hospital by 11, and so I went round the peninsula, which is 16k before that, and I just thought, it's got to be giving something to the system, brightness in the cheeks, or I don't know, a bit of exhaustion. Yeah. So definitely, I felt like I was arriving in good shape.
Yeah.
Interestingly, my surgeon said to me at one point, you're going to do quite well. You're going to do well. Don't worry, you're going to do well with this. And I never asked him why he said that. And I don't know whether that was because I was still able to be mobile and still able to do stuff. I don't know. Because a lot of people, I was fortunate enough to be able to get one as soon as I could get one, which was 2 months wait. But I just heard some friends who have had an 8-month wait list extended to 18 months. That's a long time to wait if you're not comfortable.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'd had to do that. And I don't know how that would have changed if I'd had a longer wait time. Maybe I would have had to use narcotics.
So am I hearing then that the sort of advice for someone that knows that surgery is in the pipeline for them is to load up as best you can in a tolerable way, load up the area if you're not irritating it, if it's not pissing you off too much, and then stay active? Is that kind of
That's a good
summary
baseline.
of what you said?
Yeah,
and is there anything else you'd add? Or
Well, some of the things that I was doing were a bit annoying, but not for more than 24 hours. Beforehand. So it felt to me like okay, because I just think, I don't know, you can put a conceptual frame on it, but it's major surgery. I still don't, that's why I sort of have trouble deferring someone, someone says, I can just do this, but it is major surgery, and some people have complications. And so you want to just make your system robust as you can.
And any other, just, general tips or things to share from your looking back now? What about the more mental load of it all, or the worry, or all that kind of, I don't know, how you kind of have to coach yourself through some of these things?
Wow, it's sort of like when I got the X-ray results, and it said moderate to severe you know, like a little bump on the femur and stuff. It's almost like everything relaxed at that point. There was a sense of, okay, now I've got a new baseline. This is it. It's not like what. So the certainty of the diagnosis was actually quite useful. Meeting the surgeon really helped as well. So there's sort of like you get swept away a bit. And I think that you need to find your way to deal with your stress, you know, or you need to, you know, look for ways that mediate your stress and your negative thinking, and it'll be different for everybody, but yeah.
And so the last little note I have around the like prehab thing is that you, in all your deep diving, actually sought out like different health professionals, and this is when you sort of, they're all helping you at the same time. But I wonder, what did you take away specifically from working with the hip physio, or those, we were sort of talking about those like 4 moves that you were doing, you know, like is this a good time to just kind of...
Yeah, I think they were good. So I couldn't find a local physio, so I found a physio online, and he gave me, and so I was given 4 exercises to do, times 10, 3 times a week or something, and 3 of them were really about building up the posterior capacity, so stepping up, sit to stand, and stepping up, sit to stand, a plank, and something else. So they were good because at that point that like if you think about a step up, that step up was harder, and so it just meant that I could tune in to what was happening when I pressed down. So that press down, just the simple act of pressing down has been with me the whole way, in terms of like you can sort of tell what's happening if I can't really do the press down. So yes, those 4 exercises were great, and I did them for 2 months.
Yeah. And they seem very like, sorry to use the term, but like functional, you know, like you're stepping up, you're sitting down.
Yeah.
They're just the kind of things that you want in your body to be able to reach for when you actually have to think about them.
Yeah. And you do them anyway.
Yeah.
But something about making them more conscious meant that you're kind of taken a bit more into the finer points and noticing when you're weighting on one side more.
And then I just remember us talking about this, so I'll throw the question at you and either swipe it away or not. But you were talking about someone else you knew that was doing pre-hab, before their op, and you were saying something about that you thought that there was no frontal plane movements in their rehab. Is it worth talking about that kind of stuff to think about it, or is it just like, was that just an interesting insight?
No,
to me.
No, I think that was the person who was doing really good gym work,
right?
Trying to work up to maybe having a hip replacement, and he showed me what he was doing, and he wasn't doing anything sideways. Yeah. And so, for example, like you could do a side step or something, noticing what's happening with the push-off foot, not the one that's lifting out. And getting him down into a side plank, and either leg, either the one pressing into the ground or the one lifting up, just he hadn't done it. It's not that he couldn't do it, but he just sort of like doing that dumbbell thing. It's like, okay, it's not in my repertoire right now. And I don't think I got given that by the physio, but I think I found that somewhere else. Just doing sidestepping and really focusing with a band around your ankles a bit to give a bit of resistance. Yeah.
Okay, and then we get to the like, you're as ready as you can be. You're going to go under the knife. Since you having the surgery, I've mentioned other people that I know are having it, and one of your first questions is what type of hip surgery they're having, and I think, I don't know. I thought it was just cut open and get in there. So you are aware of there might be different styles of a hip replacement that you'd get, and tell me about those and why and what.
So I'd happened to meet but I recognised that there was more than one type, and I recognise that the one that's gaining favour is an anterior approach, where the muscles aren't cut, they're more just deflected, and then you go in through the front of the hip joint, through the front of the hip capsule and through those anterior ligaments. And so I knew that when I went to my surgeon, and I said to him, that one sounds like a jolly good idea with no muscle cutting. And he said, I don't do that. And there was no one in Wellington that does that. There is someone in Christchurch, there is someone in Auckland, and apparently it's really big in New York because of that, less invasive on the muscles, less cutting of the muscles, so less muscle get online again. I think that it is becoming popularised, and it is quite a fine thing, so you've got to be really careful about how you go in, and there can be, you know, some loss of nerve feeling on the skin afterwards. And so he said, no, I don't do that. So that's okay. And so I said, oh, what do you do? I had two sort of criteria when I went. I wanted someone who could communicate well and who was a good technician. And what I realised at the end was, surgeons are engineers. they're engineers, that's their game. Yeah. And this guy does 5 surgeries a day. You know, it's. And I did say to him, what's been you're learning in the last 25 years? What have you learned about doing these? Because he's been doing it for as long as I've had kids. So I just that's a time frame I understand. And so for the length of time he's been doing it, he hasn't had people come back yet, except for the weird ones, because it's still in that 25-year time frame, which is interesting. But he said, I've just learned that everyone's individual. I didn't learn that in my first 10 years, but in the last 15 to 10 years I've learned that everyone's individual, and there's an individual approach to what tissues need to be released. But anyway, so he comes in the back. And I walked away from that first appointment and I realised I didn't have enough information, so I asked for another time. I wanted to bring in some pictures and for him to show me exactly what he's going to do. And so they cut parallel to the glute max. It's a posterior approach. They used to cut through the muscles on the side, and then they worked out that you didn't need to do that. You could go in more posterior. Cut through glute max, one cut. And then you open up and you've got your deep rotators, which attach onto the leg bone, and it's one cut. It's one cut through the deep rotators, which in massage school we have always prioritised. We have always prioritised as, these guys are really important with the stability of the hip and just the control of the hip, the happiness of the hip. And so the idea of cutting through them seems a bit kind of like extreme, but anyway, one cut, which from an anatomy perspective I'm thinking, okay, there's muscles, there's ligaments, there's joint capsule. He doesn't think like that. There's one cut and it goes through the whole shebang. So that was it was useful for me to realise that the whole approach is different and things aren't separate. They're all part of a thing. So they make that cut, they deflect those tendons and wrap up the sciatic nerve so it doesn't get irritated. That's good. And then they've got exposure to the hip joint, because what I hadn't also realised was that the joint capsule comes right up to the bone. For some reason I thought it was just smaller and shorter, but it's right up there with the muscles and tendons. And then it's dislocation, grinding out the pelvic part to make it all smooth, and then chopping off the neck of the femur. It's a 40-minute operation, and then banging the stem in of the new part. And I was fortunate that the bone was strong, so I didn't need cement or anything. And then screwing on the ceramic top, and then putting it back together. And then taking those tissues that have been deflected and then drilling 3 tiny holes in the side of the leg bone and pulling them through, which is sort of like bringing the capsule back over. I sort of don't understand all of this. I'd go back a third time and find out a little bit more, but pulling them back over and giving them a base to work on.
So you go in through the front, you go in through the back. They're your options.
Yep. So going through the back, supposedly, you're not supposed to do too much hip flexion because that's going to sort of open up this area. Going through the front, you're not supposed to do too much hip extension.
Anything else to say about the surgery, or what about that kind of phase?
Well, when he comes in, the surgeon, every day, so it's in there 3 nights. Every morning, the following morning, he'd come in for the 2 mornings. And he'd say, how are you? And I'd go, first night. But anyway, I said, what did you find in there? Because I'd learned that you've got to ask questions. If he says, no, everything's looking really good, what does that mean? I'm going to do really good. What does that mean? And he said, well, it was good that we did it because your labrum was shredded. So the little skirt around the helping to sort of like the hip go, the leg bone goes inside, was shredded. And the synovium, which is the fluid in the joint, was blooded. I said, oh, what does that mean? and he goes, well, some are dry. Sometimes it's really dry, there's no fluid left. But the blooded just means it's inflamed. So then that inflammation is part of the sensitizing the pain experience. Yeah. So yeah.
You're really in someone else's hands at that point, aren't you?
Yep. Yeah.
They've had a look. You haven't.
No.
You barely understand what's happening to you.
Yeah.
Especially if you are not interested in anatomy or don't have this kind of like body focus in the rest of your life. Like you are just kind of at that point letting go and hoping for it. Yeah. And you did talk a little bit about, and I think we've probably already touched on it, but I'll just point it out so you can specifically say, just about like the power dynamics of working in the like medical, and being in a primary medical system, how it was for you, and where and when you needed an advocate or to like have a second appointment. And
yeah, I just think
it's not an hour with a massage therapist.
No, you're on a time frame. You know you're on a time frame, and that power differential, it sort of like blurs your mind a little bit. Like it's not easy to consolidate what you'd really like to know, and often I didn't know that till after. So I did take a person with me who was writing things down. Right, which was really good. At one point they said, what about the left hip? Why don't you do both hips? At the same time, and he turned to her and said, it's not prophylactic. You don't do it unless you have to. But it was good to have someone there. It's really good to have someone there. And I walked away just realising how, ask the follow-up question. If he says something, there's always another question.
Just ask another question.
Yeah, well, ask another question.
Yeah, rule of thumb, just ask another question.
Yeah, that would be my rule of thumb. Okay, they say you ask something, they tell you
what
something.
Does that mean?
Yeah, even if you just say, can you say that in another way, please?
Yes. Nice, really good. So then you end up with a new thing inside you, and you've got to heal and recover. Yeah. And you have. Yeah. How did it go?
Yeah. The first days are just so unbelievably weird. I think the things that helped were again around the feeling like in control. So simple things like in the bed when you come back, just moving your toes, moving your ankles, moving your knees. They wanted me to kind of bring my heel to my hip. I found that really, really hard. But just even thinking about it. So again, just trying to get back in your body because your body's been absolutely traumatized. And I haven't got huge glute mass anyway, but nothing. It was just like, and I tried to squeeze my buttocks and it was just like gone. So the cutting through those muscles really does put them offline. My surgeon said, one of my first questions was, apart from what have you learned, was what do you think about rehab? What are your recommendations for rehab? He's not a rehab person, he's an engineer. This person, he said you don't have to worry. With a hip, you don't have to worry. With life will rehab you. If you had a knee, it's different. You really need to get your quadriceps working again and things. But that's sort of like, it just doesn't make sense to me, really. And my two brother-in-laws have had hip replacements, and no rehab. They just weren't interested. Wasn't
The problem's fixed.
Why? Exactly. Problem's fixed. And, the job's done and I'll just get on with my life. And they're both quite mobile. But I just have a query, and I do wonder whether, particularly with this one, which is I think what they had as well, but there's a strapping down that happens at the back, at the posterior. And I just feel like I feel like that needs encouragement to open, to have more space back in there rather than being held tight. And I do wonder, I haven't done this yet, but sort of curious about getting them to see whether they could deadlift, like whether they could hinge or not. Maybe you don't need to hinge in your life. You just might not need to hinge. But I have a question. Maybe the hinging well and getting everything participating in hip movement, not just some structures, maybe that can longer term be a useful thing. That's just my question. That helps me.
And it's a question that there's not really an answer to at this stage, because what you said you were wondering was, does the rehab elongate the life of the new hip?
Yeah.
And there's not really the evidence
No.
to look at,
No.
is there?
No.
But I'd believe it. It sounds believable.
It sounds
right?
believable to us.
Yeah.
But so another interesting thing was that when I was given my pack at the hospital, before I met the physio, you have physio for a couple of days there. Before I met them, they give you this kind of like pack that's clearly been given out for the last 30 years. It's like, at the massage college, those first stretches we did, singular stretches with the round-faced person just doing this or something. Yeah. It was literally so old-fashioned. And so I did look into, before my operation, I did look into, what is the literature, what is the evidence for doing rehab? Is there any? And I came across a woman called Alison Grimaldi, who did a really good blog called Flick the Flap. Because the standard rehab is to stand and to swing your leg out, or to swing your leg back. For both, it doesn't matter what surgery you've got, but basically to get that extension back and the abduction back in an open chain way. And she was referring to, her blog was centered around questioning whether those things were actually high value. And she mentioned a review paper that came out with over 1,000 subjects and 35 randomized control trials looking at, have people felt better when they do rehab after a total hip replacement in the last 30 years. And their findings were no difference, that it was pretty you don't really need to do it. And I think that's where my surgeon was getting his, you don't need to bother. But as she said, some of those papers were from like 30 years ago, and the whole idea about loading or exercise has changed, is going through a change. And the people some of the people who are like in the market for a hip replacement, it's still largely an older person's thing, but there's more younger people as well, and so they're not the same demographic, and we don't even know if those people did the exercises, whatever. So
and so I think back to the last chat, the critique is that the condition hasn't happened overnight. It has a long, generation period with OA, and so it's kind of interesting that what formal rehab there is so old school. And so there's room to just be doing more stuff early on, or to intervene earlier rather than like 6 months before you actually need the surgery. And there's also room to have more, or just evolve what is the formal rehab that's given.
Yeah.
Too late, not good enough kind of thing. Intervention's too late and rehab's not very sexy these days. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I remember 6 or 7 years ago, in a massage class, in a musculoskeletal 2 class, getting people to throw a pen on the ground and walk up, pick it up, and see how we all do that. And back then, I could feel that I couldn't use one leg like I could use the other leg. So, you know, maybe if I'd worked on that earlier, who knows? I don't know. The genetic thing is sort of confusing to me, really. I don't really understand the genetics, you know, like
fair enough.
Clearly it's a non-modifiable thing.
Yeah.
So you're with it. You've got it. You know, if I got knocked off my bike and had a trochanteric bursitis 6 years ago or 5 years ago, could that have made it worse? I don't know. So I do think, I don't know. I start to get all like, should you? Like the person who said, oh, I'm going to have a hip replacement because you've done quite well.
Yeah.
You know, I just want him to be trying some different things, but
who knows? Yeah.
Who knows?
It could be a really efficient call to be making.
It could be.
And there's no evidence that sort of sway you either way. It's kind of in the middle. Do it if you feel like that's your disposition. Don't do it if that's your disposition.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Anything else to say specifically about the rehab side of it?
Don't know. I mean, it's tricky. You know, I have my brothers-in-law and they're just getting on with it and they're fine. And you ask them a specific and they won't be able to tell you. So I think, like, you're right. It's sort of like it makes sense to me with my background that doing stuff which is making the hip work more is a smart thing. And as I said in the beginning, like, everything goes offline. Like, everything goes offline. Like, to bring that back online feels really good. But do my brothers-in-law have that? Or I don't know. I think activity is obviously useful, and you know, just changing your some kind of activity is really useful because of all the things it might give. I don't think we understand quite what it gives, apart from switching muscles on, perhaps. Yeah. You know, in terms of making you the drug effects of the brain or changing your outlook. When I go around the peninsula, I feel good. Yeah. So if you've got something that makes you feel good, I think crucial.
Yeah. I remember a point in your rehab where you were really at that. The message was, it's really just about getting range of motion back now.
Yeah. Well, I would say at 6 months, there's still I can still feel that I'm limited into rotation, and I'd like a bit more, like cross-legged. I'd like a bit more, so I'm sort of working with that. And like, I remember from the training we did, an excellent 300-hour biomechanics training with Jules Mitchell. Muscles repair in months, muscles in weeks, bones in months, and connective tissue in years. So my feeling now is that I've got a sense of the muscles, and I sort of know, you know, oh yeah, there is something we'll add in a minute, but I've got a sense of the muscles, but I do wonder about, like, the joint capsule and the ligament, like, they've been cut through too, and so I wonder if by just persevering with this, that the range of motion will just, there will
There's
be
still time.
continued adaptation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I just did want to say one thing.
Yes.
So the starting off early, like just trying to get some feeling, like even if you can't move something, think about it, like move but don't actually move. And some of the exercises in my post program with when we're sort of doing similar things before, like step ups, lateral step ups and things, I think it really helped me to have structure, because I don't know I would have done it if I didn't have that. These are the 4 exercises you're doing for 3 months, 2 sets, and you do them 3 times a week, times 12 or something. I think that was really useful to find something that I just peppered my week with, without going overboard. But a couple of them were around stretching early on, like at about 3 months. Things like what's it called when you put your leg over here?
Like a figure 4?
Like a figure 4, yeah. And to just hang there in a stretch. And I found it much more useful to be doing a resistance with it, like to actually think about
Being on.
Switching on, like just getting things to work. And there was another one I did where it was a rotation one as well, where I could take it through the range and have resistance the whole way with the other leg. So, yeah, just sort of like resistance exercise was really useful as well, and open chain resistance exercise was really useful, as well as things more closed chain. So the thing with Flick the Flap was that she was highlighting the fact that in the prescriptive thing you get from the hospital, it's open chain, standing at a chair and swinging your leg or swinging it backwards. And her idea was that doing a single leg squat or lunging, that kind of thing, sideways movement, like even like the side plank, but working on the down leg pushing into the ground, like more closed chain, where you're actually having to resist what's happening, not just flying a limb into the air.
Yeah.
Really useful.
Makes sense, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
I know. It was really surprising, like getting into the side plank position. I could lift my surgical leg up, but when I had that as a down leg, I could not press into the floor. So those were really kind of interesting. Yeah.
I think we're in our recap phase.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've sort of touched on the if you did A, B, and C, will you be better off in the future? Who knows? Good question to be asking. And then also we've talked a little bit about like this, that kind of feeds into this conversation about like the relationship between what you do and what actually works, and that different things work for different people. It doesn't need to just be biking, or it doesn't need to just be doing those 4 exercises 3 times a week, or it doesn't just need to be high load, but it's sort of dabbling in a bit of everything could and should be useful. What else is kind of on top at this point, or what else would you like to say or share as we come, I don't know, to the more that like you kind of now can walk a little more away from your hip, so to speak.
Right.
You're in a less consuming place with it.
Well, I think going back to what you were saying before about like feeling in control, I think having the underride that the body is adaptable, and it's not like a broken table or something that has lost a leg, but that it actually responds to what you do. It's like I think we mentioned this last time, but it's like it is a dynamic. So why not talk to it in some way, like to not feel limited, is to notice when you are have a self-limiting belief like you can't do something, or I'm stuck in a certain way. So I've noticed over the 6 months it changes. Like I couldn't sit like that cross-legged 2 months ago, sort of cross-legged. So it's changing all the time, and that's kind of like, that's cool. It's like, you know, you can start now, you don't have to, you know. Yeah, I think to be alert when you're, you know, what you're telling yourself about yourself. Sort of thing. What else can we do? But yeah, just notice what the story is. Yeah, and then go do something.
You could be in the passenger seat, but why don't you get in the driver's seat?
Yeah.
Nice. Oh, so good, so good. Well, thank you for sharing all your wisdom. You've really lived through this, and you've taken me along for the ride. So full respect to you for where you're at and what you've gathered up along the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridie.